How often do you read books? You know, those things with words and sentences in them? Once a day? Once a week? Once a month? Or once a year? If you want to read books but haven't been able to, this is the podcast for you. Here you will hear ardent book enthusiasts, voracious readers, and prolific authors talk about books with passion. If you have a suggestion for a book that you always wanted to know about before reading, please let us know. While piquing your curiosity is our job, picking the book that we talked about is your job. Enjoy!
Hello and welcome everyone to Books and Stuff podcast. Atreides. Oh, sorry, I couldn't prevent myself from voicing out the main topic of today's podcast. A month ago, maybe, I thought of watching a movie, and I watched this movie, and I said, how can I talk about that movie in books and stuff? It's books and stuff. How can I talk about this movie? Then I started talking to different people, and I was speaking to Parvathi, and I said, oh, I love this movie. And she said, you know what? This is actually based on a book. I said, you can't be serious. She said, yeah, not one book, but three of them. I said, wow. And there are more apparently. I don't know how many there are. I asked her, so have you read all the books? She said, yep. Okay, let's talk about it. Now I'm referring to Dune Part 1, the movie, and Dune, the book series. For the sake of keeping the spoilers intact, we will not reveal what happens after Dune Part 1. I still want to get surprised at when I watch Dune Part 2. So I made a request to Parvati. I'm Bala Ramadurai, and with me I have my co-host Parvati. Say hello, Parvati.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to our discussion of Dune. It's going to be so exciting today.
Okay, let's have it then. What is the synopsis of the book?
Yeah.
Please limit it to Dune Part 1.
Okay. So, Dune, the movie, is divided into two parts, and it's based on the entirety of the first Dune novel. I will stop my synopsis where the movie ends. So when the book begins, you have a young boy called Paul Atreides. He is 15 years old, and he is brought before a certain old woman who calls herself the Reverend Mother. Her name is Gaius Helen Moham, and she is here in Paul's house, which is called Castle Caladan. It's on the planet Caladan. She's here to test Paul, and she wants to test his abilities and his humanity, and she puts him through a very, very painful exercise. She asks him to put his hand in a box, experience pain, and then she tries to figure out what he's about. And so it comes to be that there is something extremely unusual about Paul. He is not an ordinary quote unquote child. He's different. He's too intelligent. He displays abilities that should not be visible in a child like him. His mother is a member of the order that the Reverend Mother is part of. They're called the Bene Gesserit. They're a quasi-religious political group who indulge in selective breeding to bring perfection to the human race. Jessica, Paul's mother, has done something to Paul. She has given him training that she's not supposed to give him. And so he's extraordinary. The Reverend Mother is unhappy about it. Things change in Castle Caladan because Paul's father is the Duke Leto of House Atreides. He's been asked to replace House Harkonnen in the planet Dune. That's where all the spice is controlled. The spice melange plays a very important role in Dune. It controls trade, thinking, a whole lot of things. And the imperial forces headed by the Padishah Emperor want to control spice and put Duke Atreides in place of Duke Harkonnen there on the planet Dune as part of a larger political plot. However, what happens is the Emperor wants Duke Atreides out, Harkonnen wants Duke Atreides out, everybody wants a spice, including the Spacing Guild that controls all interplanetary travel. When Duke Atreides' family, including Paul, land on Dune, they are betrayed. They are betrayed by one of their own, as we'll find out later. Paul's abilities keep coming to the front. He is thoroughly confused with these abilities. And there is a group of locals on Dune who call themselves the Freemen. Apparently, Paul fits certain legends that the Freemen have about an off-world messianic figure and the Lisan Algrib. So he seems to fit what the Freemen have in mind. And then when House Harkonnen and the Emperor's forces managed to dethrone House Atreides through a long and complicated process that involved bloodthirsty soldiers called the Sardaukar, Paul and his mother find themselves in the hands of the Freemen. Paul has to use his powers to prove himself to the Freemen and take on his role as a messianic figure. That's where the movie ends, and that's where I'm going to stop today, Bala.
Okay, great. So actually, movie, as I remember seeing these things, I just watched it last night. So the order seems to be a bit different, I think,
Mhm.
because it starts off with Paul, training to fight. They introduce the idea of the voice as the mom's training him. So we get some idea that Paul has some vision, and then we also get to know about this transfer. In the initial narration, they talk about the importance of the spice and the Fremen and the blue eyes, but they don't use the word melange at all. They only call it spice throughout. We also get to know that it's a hallucinogen and that Duncan is the main person who's training Paul. Gurney is the sort of stand-in trainer. Paul is gifted. We get to know of all of that. Paul and Leto, they talk to each other. Then is the transfer actually happen. They move to Arrakis. But in the meantime, they also show Baron and Rabban and all those bad guys in Gedi Prime. Okay, fine, I'll call it Gedi Prime. Sometimes they say it and I haven't caught it. They said
Padishah,
something
yeah.
about the Emperor. So then later is when this episode, just before they leave, this pain and pain in the box and what is it? Jom Gobar,
The
Jab
Jom Gab,
Gobar,
yes, Gom
Gom
Jabba.
Jabar,
Yeah.
Jab Gomar. I don't know. It's poisonous, all right, and it has a needle, all right. So that's when we
Yeah.
get it. And then they get to
Yeah.
Arrakis. This whole betrayal happens. But from what I heard from your synopsis,
Ah,
looks like apart from the order, they pretty much have the story straight. I think so.
yes. It seems to me that the movie changed it around just a little bit because Dune, the book, introduces all your concepts very slowly. So for a long time, you know that everybody wants a spice, but you don't know what they do with it. It takes its time building it up. And also, when
Hmm.
it comes to Paul's abilities, again, you know that he's extraordinary. You somehow guess towards the quarter of the book that there is some sort of messianic power to him, but nothing is revealed immediately. It takes time. And what Jessica, Paul's mother, did to him also is revealed slowly. So probably
Hmm.
that is why the movie decided to switch things up a little so you don't get confused while watching it.
Got it. I
Yeah.
think the whole narration and introduction of the Dune itself was
Mm.
was some sort of informing the people about all the concepts,
Yes.
particularly space. If they say, "Oh, it's responsible for space travel," the
Yeah.
same thing that is used for it being a hallucinogen is
Mm.
also fuel for space travel. How do
Yeah.
they use that? Is there something in the book that talks about how the spice is responsible for all of these?
So the book doesn't, the first Dune at least, it doesn't give you a clear idea of what spice does. I mean, you know that it's a hallucinogen and that it kind of gives Paul's powers and it activates his mental faculties. We do know that much. And it gives him clairvoyance and allows him to see into the future and look into the past. It also makes him know things that he's not supposed to know, which is sort of compounded with his own mentat abilities. But
Mm.
regarding space travel, no, the book doesn't go into detail. You know that the
Oh.
Spacing Guild wants spice, it's important to them. But what does the
Mm.
spice do for the Spacing Guild? That we don't know.
But what is Spacing Guild? That also is not mentioned in the
Yeah.
movie.
So, what the book
We
says,
see
yeah,
these in Star Trek. We have this Doomsday machine, which is
yes,
like a huge cone.
yeah,
That kind of a machine just shows up near a giant planet, and we know this is huge. Tiny specks come out,
yes,
and they land on the planet, and they show these gigantic things. because how do I to it? They're like tiny
Mm.
things in front of that. So that's when I
Mm.
know that this cream roll thing is huge,
Yeah.
and we have no idea how it actually travels. We all see this cream roll thing moves here and there.
Yeah. So we don't know much about this spacing
Okay.
these roles either because we haven't
Okay.
given much of context. But
Oh.
the book does make clear is that the Padishah emperor has
Hmm.
several houses under him. All those houses are warring with each other, and the emperor's caught in the middle making his own plans. That we do know.
Hmm.
There's a Chom company which wants to control the spice, and they have shares and profits, and everybody wants a slice because the spice brings in a whole lot of money. All the
Hmm.
houses have some sort of share in the company. So there is
Hmm.
some sort of a corporation running a huge operation
Hmm.
in deep space as well as on those planets. We know that the Spacing Guild is the mysterious guild that charges
Hmm.
exorbitant prices to take people from one place to the other. You only see the ambassadors and the representatives of the Spacing Guild. You don't see the people who are controlling those ships, and that remains a mystery in the book. Obviously, there is something
Ah.
different about them. There are rumors about them. And Paul remarks that perhaps he can see one of those. His father
Hmm.
says nobody ever sees a guildsman. You only
Oh,
see the
okay. None of
representatives.
this is mentioned in the movie.
Yeah.
In fact, I happened to sneak a glimpse of the older one,
Mm.
movie Dune, the 1984 movie, I think. There they show this giant, I don't know, it looks like a manatee with strange sort of nostrils, and it's emitting some kind of gas from its nostrils, which is orangish, and it looks cartoonish more than something that can control space travel. So that's the I said, okay, I'm not going to watch that movie, I'm not going to continue watching that movie. So I came back to Dune, the 2021 movie. The interesting part is the character building, about how Jessica has a conflict that she wants to bear a son for the Duke. However, she is not allowed to have a son because she is part of the sisterhood. They're allowed to only have daughters. And somewhere in the movie they reveal that the emperor has only daughters, which means he has no apparent heirs. So Paul even comes up with an idea at the end saying maybe I should aim for the throne. Yeah. So there's a lot of politics, and like you said, I think I get the business angle also, but they don't reveal the other shareholders. They only talk about Harkonnen, and they say that the Harkonnens probably have a lot more money and they're richer than the emperor himself, because they've been mining spice for 80 years, and per year they get some billions of solari. Baron Vladimir Harkonnen reveals that he controls the supply of spice because he doesn't want the price of the spice to go down, because Leto now is declared Leto is dead, and now he can release the spice back into the market, but he wants to
Mm.
do it slowly because he wants to control price. So we see that business angle part of it. There is politics because there is a clash between these two houses, but because the emperor has instigated the whole thing and he has sent his own troops, the Sardukars, three legions. That's that.
Yes. Yes. It's one of those things where you don't know who's actually pulling the strings until much later. And basically, Baron Harkonnen is one of those characters that you can never trust. He's talking so coolly to his nephew about what he intends to do, but then there are so many things that he does not say. It keeps you guessing, especially when it comes to the Sardaka. Baron Harkonnen is so caught up in the politics and in imperial house business that, and in trying to maximize his profits, that you can't guess what he's at until much later, because in the beginning you find him revealing certain plans to his nephew Pedrota, but then you don't it's not clear whether he's planning to stick to those plans or whether there's something he's not telling him. And obviously he's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He wants to install one nephew on Arrakis, also called Dune, and he wants the other one to take over from from the first nephew. He's got a lot of things, and eventually he just ties himself up in knots.
Actually, that part is not at all revealed what their relationship is.
Yes.
We get to know about Rabon, and he calls Baron uncle. So I didn't know. I mean, I saw the synopsis of the
Yeah.
book. In that, it said Pieter. Is it Pieter?
Peter De Vries, yes.
So he is a nephew is something that's not revealed in the movie. He just dies in that poison attack
Oh,
by
Peter De Vries, yes,
Leto.
yes, with the poison capsule that was installed on Duke Leto. The book says, this is towards the beginning itself, the book says that Baron Harkonnen, he has two nephews, they're brothers.
Okay.
And this is revealed more or less at the beginning, and they don't really get along. Baron Harkonnen, he prefers one nephew over the other. He believes that the older brother is a bit Raban, he's a bit of a dolt, and he can be manipulated. The other brother, who's Fayed Rauta, he is the more cunning, the more scheming, the more charismatic of the two, supposedly.
Huh. But
Yeah.
he's a mentat.
He's not a mentat. The mentat is Peter De Vries, Harkonnen.
Okay. Oh, so he's not the nephew. I got it all wrong then.
Peter De Vries Harkonnen has two nephews. One is Raban, who he wants to keep in charge of
Right.
Arrakis, and the other
Okay.
one is Fair Drauta, who he
Oh,
prefers to be in charge of Arrakis. So
we
he
don't
wants,
see him at
see
all.
either of them, I think, in the movie until
No,
part two.
Rabban
Yeah,
does show up.
yeah,
Rabban does show up. He leads the forces
yeah.
on Arrakis.
Yes.
He's the hot-headed one. He wants spice production back. He doesn't like being sent out of Arrakis and all that. And Baron is the one who's thinking.
Taking all the decisions. The book introduces both of these guys in the beginning.
Oh, okay.
Both the nephews.
And he lies. Baron doesn't want to antagonize the Reverend Mother because she's the truth sayer for the
The Padishah
to the
Emperor.
Emperor.
Yes,
So
yes.
he doesn't want to antagonize her. However, he promises that they won't be killed. But he does sort of goes back on that word by shipping him off into the dune, the desert, into warm territory or wherever. And yeah, so the Baron's character is established clearly from the word go that he's intelligent but he's bad. So we get that idea.
The trouble with the Baron is because he's corpulent, he's so fat and he's
Mm,
grossly fat. So I think people
yes.
misjudge him and think that he's not as intelligent, but he can be extraordinarily vicious. He has all these schemes within schemes and he wants certain things in place, even if it means lying to the Emperor's truth sayer.
I think that's the advantage in the movie because the star cast and the makeup already has conveyed everything that the book tried to convey. Is this is Stellan Skarsgård? His makeup shows that he's like corpulent and really daunting. We already know this guy is intelligent. That's it. So it's established. We got all that whatever you have described in probably 3 or 4 visuals. In fact, the first few scenes of the Baron was hardly minute long or something. That's it.
Yeah, but that's enough to create an impact, I think.
And
One thing that I found particularly
tell me.
unnerving about the Baron was that he's so fat that he can't walk and he must use those suspensors. And those supports to walk. And each time that is mentioned, you get your skin crawls. He also tells his nephew at one point that don't mistake him for being unintelligent or, don't
Mm.
underestimate him.
Mm.
He's actually a very intimidating and very frightening character to me.
In the movie, but in the second time we meet him, we see that he can rise all the way up to like 20 feet, 25 feet. So all we see is this. I was wondering, is he like one of those king cobra kind of a thing which can raise its hood? So you get that snake kind of feeling when. Yeah, you're already fearful of him.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
it's got enough fear seats in your brain.
Yes, one thing that adds also, especially in the book when you read it, he uses poison, these honeyed words that are actually poison, and you're thinking, what is he doing? It's a very formidable enemy.
Yes, that much they have firmly established. And so they try to, even in that poison scene, the way he deals with Yue, I mean, sends shivers up your spine. Like, okay, I'm going to set you free, is what something he says, and you can join your wife.
Yes,
And
he does
off
say
goes
that.
US head.
Yes, because Yue here, he's thinking about his Varna and that he wants to find out what happened to her. It strikes him eventually that she's probably dead and they're using him, but he can't be sure. And because he's not sure, he must continue doing what he's doing and subvert his imperial conditioning so that he can find out what really happened to her. And the Baron, he says, you may join your wife. And what he
Wow.
means is you're going to die. He is not
Oh,
saying that, we are going to be reunited here in the living world. You're going to be killed so that you can join her wherever.
right. Another reveal for me is when he's cool, when Leto is paralyzed by whatever, and Baron is sitting in, the head of the table and is munching away, and he says, "Oh, you have a good chef cousin." Then I realize, oh, they're cousins. Is that in the book also?
I don't recall this particular scene because these people are actually related, comes in a different way.
No, this one, he just is munching away while Leto is completely helpless. All he can do is roll his eyes from left to right, and he's chomping away. So, in many ways, they try to contrast these characters because you already identified yourself with Paul and Jessica and Leto, and then here is this guy who's ready to kill them. So, you already made up your mind. These guys are bad. That's it.
And the thing about Harkonnen, Vladimir Harkonnen, is just so bad. He's bad right from the beginning. You know he's bad. There are no shades of gray. He is bad.
Wow, absolutely. He's dressed in black throughout. Or he's stark naked. So these are the two states that you see him in the movie. They show him in a sauna and he's like ripples of fat. And in
Yeah.
the scene, they show him in a dark, backdrop where he's speaking to the Bene Gesserit, the Reverend Mother. Again, backdrop, and he's like slowly rising 20 feet above the air. They show him in a dark tone. And if you didn't get the other hints, oh, here, by the way, off comes US head.
Yes. I have a feeling that the Baron makes a lot more appearances in the movie than he does in the book.
Okay.
Seems like he does make a lot of appearances in the book, in your face in the movie. That
Yes,
makes
yes.
sense.
They show him he's recovering from the poison gas or whatever. They show him in a slushy tank, which is dark again,
Yeah.
and they show these like oil droplets and all that. Pretty
Yes.
disgusting place. And then out bobs his head out of that mush. And he comes out and says, okay, Araban goes on about how they have killed Leto, Jessica, and Paul. All of them are dead. They ran into a storm. There's no way they can be found alive. And then out bobs his head and he says, finally it's done. Now we can go back to business, kind of a thing. It is
Yeah.
that casual tone. He just says that.
So there's a difference there in the book because what we have is you have this in Nefud, who's a guard captain. He is talking to Baron Harkonnen and telling him about the deaths of Jessica
Ah,
and
okay.
Paul Atreides. The Baron is actually in his sleeping quarters there. And
Oh.
this captain of the guard, he says they're dead. And Baron Harkonnen is asking him, did you see the body? Are you sure they're dead? Did you see them
Hmm.
being killed? And the captain of the guard is taken aback and he says, no, nobody's
Hmm.
seen the bodies or anything like that. They are just
Hmm.
assuming that Jessica and Paul are dead, and Baron Harkonnen, he just loses his temper there. It is a
Hmm.
it is a very powerful scene, that because he is so sharp. He knows that these guys haven't seen either Jessica or Paul being killed. They're just
Hmm.
assuming that they have died based on what they know of the deserts of Arrakis.
Hmm.
But all of them have underestimated both Jessica and Paul, and that came through so well in that chapter, Dune.
That's an important point because I thought, given Baron is so sharp, how
Yeah.
come he just accepted what Rabban said about the Coriolis storm and the 800 kilometer per hour winds? And they were flying in an ornithopter. In the small section of the movie of the 84 book that I saw, it starts off saying Reverend Mother actually overhearing the guild captain and Baron, the Emperor, talking about the fact that Paul is a dangerous person and he has to be killed. So I'm not sure it's there in the book, but in the 84 version it is there. Here there's no mention of Paul being special. Hardly cares about this stuff except that he should survive so that he can pass it on from him to Paul. And
Mm.
Jessica, of course, knows that she's raising him to be special.
Yes, it's Paul. In the book, what we find is that Paul's messianic abilities are on display right at the beginning, and there's a particular dinner scene where they call in all the smugglers and the people of importance on Dune. They invite
Hmm.
them to dinner. This is before the Atreides house was destroyed.
Hmm.
And he's called out for a brief time, and Paul has to take over. He actually baits some of the guests into saying things that they don't want to say, and he almost enters a duel because of that. But that scene where he baits some individuals and gets on their nerves, basically,
Hmm.
it shows us intelligence that is cultivated.
Hmm.
He is more aware of what's going on around him, and he seems to predict that things are going to happen in such a way, and he's able to speak to people knowing what they're going to say, more or less. So like, he has certain powers, especially that he may turn into some sort of a godlike figure, is hinted at many times in the beginning itself.
No, all this is not that. There is a scene
Mm,
where the Fremen leader Stilgar comes and
yeah.
meets Leto, and there Paul just sort of says, "Hi, oh, I'm here too." Leto is the one who says, desert power is what I want. That's why I'm here,
Yes.
not for the riches. I'm going to
Mm.
pit them against the Emperor and Harkonnen. That's going to be my play. And Paul, of course, buys that theory. He likes that. There's another scene where there is a hunter seeker which attacks Paul, but
Yes.
Paul gets rid of it in very, I mean, in an exceptional manner, which I don't think any human could have done it, or any other human could have done it, unless they had such exceptional powers. Does that come in the book?
Yeah, we do have the hunter seeker, and Paul has to stand very still, and he uses his intelligence in a split second, and to try and fool that hunter seeker and prevent it from killing him, and he kind of smashes it against the door, and it's
Yes, that he
destroyed.
does.
Yeah, that he
Yes,
does,
yes.
and it's destroyed. UA comes to get him, which is very ironic. But
Huh. Yeah, another thing that struck me was the whole conflict between Paul and Jamis. But
yeah.
I'm wondering, if Paul is so visionary, he's able to see the future, how come he didn't see the betrayal of UA and this impending attack? Is there an
Absolutely.
explanation for that?
Well, what the book does is basically most of Paul's powers come after he is exposed to the spice melange. So
Oh.
he experiences, it's written so beautifully, that scene, because once the spice starts working its way into his system, that's when all his powers come to the fore, and he feels
Hmm.
like a freak. He sees the past, he sees the future, he sees everything, and most of it is triggered by the spice. That's what the book
Hmm.
says. So basically, before that, he has had all of these powers, but they weren't as powerful as they will be later. And
Hmm.
because of Jessica's ministrations, he is strong. He
Hmm.
does know a lot of things, but then the rest of his logic and the rest of his mental abilities, a lot of what he must experience and all of the things that he can do, a lot of that comes with the spice.
Oh, okay. They show a scene where Leto and Party,
Mm.
before the siege, venture into the dune, into worm territory, where there is a harvester, there's a carry-all, and
Yes,
there's
yes.
an episode there. It happens in the book.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It does. And the worm appears, and people don't want to get out of the harvester, and they must get
Yes,
them
yes, that
out.
was a powerful scene because
Very powerful.
it shows that how attached they are to spice production, so
Mm.
much so that they don't really care about their own lives. Second is Leto's passion to save people, put that in ahead of spice or spice production or the riches. And Liet sees this. Right, Liet, we had to talk about her also. If it's a her or a so that scene actually shows that he is very human, oriented. He wants the upliftment of people in Arrakis, not only Arrakis but his own people. He cares about them.
Yes, he does. He barks out orders to get those people out of the harvester. He yells at them and tells them to come out
Yes,
before the
yes.
worm catches them. And that's when Liet Kynes decides that, this is a good duke.
By the way, is a big question: is it a she or a he in the
It's
book?
a he in the book.
Here, conveniently, I think they made it a she. She does a lot of exposition also in terms of highlighting the fact that Paul is a natural, particularly when they are wearing the still suits to get into the desert. Everybody is clumsily tied their laces or whatever. I don't know what they wear, the Fremen, but
Yeah.
Paul seems to where it almost by instinct.
Yeah, he
And
does.
oh, okay, that is also
That's there
there.
in the
Okay,
book. Yes.
okay.
Yes.
That was an interesting scene
Very
because
interesting.
we're seeing his abilities, but all that is without the influence of the spice. The first time
Mm.
he experiences the spice is right in front of that trawler. He is caught in that, like a gust of wind,
Mm.
sandstorm sort of enters because of the carryall or whatever, I don't remember. But he inhales all that spice and he's able to see visions. Now, the question to you, he's already seeing visions in the movie.
Ah.
Spice generally seems to augment that vision, but the visions he's been seeing from scene one. Is that there in the book as well?
So, what I got from here is that Paul's abilities are a lot like a mentats in the book.
Hmm.
In the beginning, he does have dreams, he does have the visions aren't as strong as they become much later, because he starts seeing the holy war and blood battles and him leading people into their doom. But before that, you see him use a lot of logic, you see him
Hmm.
use a lot of processing power because he is been trained like a mentat. He's
Hmm.
extremely perceptive and he can tell whether you're speaking the truth or not. All of that is there. But I think
Hmm.
his full power spice, I think it sort of settles into his body and it alters his consciousness completely, to the point where there is a scene in the book where he feels that he can't even mourn his father. I'm sure that's there in the movie too, but he feels that all his powers have been activated. He can see things, he sees visions. This is when the visions actually become very clear to him. And
Ah.
he knows that these things are going to come to pass. And because of the effects of those visions which that are activated by the spice, he feels he can't even mourn the death of his father because he just can't feel at that point.
They show him struggling with that part of it. That is, he knows both Jessica and Paul know when the exact moment Leto dies, and he does get visions of the war of Danny
Yes.
with a Chris knife blood, and that part is there. But he does snap out of it a little bit and says, I'm scared, I'm this, I'm that. They're all chanting his name. That's when he barks at Jessica saying, you made me a freak. So I just lost my father, you made me a freak. So yes, they were trying to convey that he's not able to mourn his father, but they didn't have dialogue to tell the same thing, right? So
Mm.
you can feel his conflict.
Yes. Paul has been raised in such unusual circumstances that it's very difficult for him to act his age. And it's very difficult for him to express what he's feeling at any given time. So even if he's afraid, he can't express it that well. He can't even tell his mother that he's afraid because there are
Hmm.
so many things going on in his head.
Hmm.
His emotions are always pushed to the back by his immediate need of action. He has never had a proper childhood. He's always been something beyond a grown up. He's ageless. He's
Hmm.
and a grown up, and he scares people. He scares his own mother because of all of that. He's never had any opportunity to saying you're frightened to your own mother is something every child should do, because if there's
Hmm.
something that frightens you, you must express it. But in Paul's case, the gap between them is just too much. It's not able to handle it.
Also, one thing that you mentioned is Paul, even in the start, before his exposure to the spice, is emotionally driven because he likes Duncan a lot. He goes and hugs him. He does the same thing with Howard. So he's quite attached to these people. And the moment he sees the vision in which Duncan actually dies. He sees them with along with other Fremen and other Sardukars. He sees the scene where he's dead and he's scared and he says, I want to come with you to Arrakis right now. The moment you leave for Arrakis, I want to accompany you. Duncan says, oh, you're trying to protect me? That's not going to happen. Forget it. I'm going to go. I don't want to be court-martialed. You stay here with your dad and I'm leaving now. They show as if he's already emotion driven and not logical. It seemed quite silly of him to jump the gun. I think there is some sort of difference between how at least the Caladan Paul versus in the movie versus in the book.
Mm. The Paul in the book, he just becomes more hardened towards the end. In the beginning, he never was portrayed as a child in the book. Not even in the beginning. He does have some childlike tendencies, but he's still not a child. He's something beyond. And that's how the book shows him throughout. Even in the beginning, when he wants to train with
Gurney.
he trains with him, there are some slips that he makes. He's not a child. He doesn't show as much as you would expect a 15-year-old would. He's not reserved, but he's more calculating. Even in the beginning, he is very calculating.
Yeah. No, I think that part comes through, that he is not your usual teenager. In fact, he is challenging everything. He's being a rebel. When he is talking to his father, they're walking through the tombs of all his ancestors, and then they see their grandfather's tomb, and there's a symbol of the bull and some guy fighting it, and then it's revealed that the grandfather took on a bull. Leto says, you see where that got him, right? So in being rebellious, it actually led to his downfall, is what Leto wants to impress upon Paul. And Paul says, I don't want to take up the responsibility of being your heir either. That's too much responsibility on my shoulders. I want to be something else. And Leto says, do you think I got this out of my own choice? I want to be a pilot, and look where I am. You just answer the duty, whenever it comes to you. That's your responsibility.
Yeah, that scene where the grandfather is introduced, it's very tame in the book. Jessica has a portrait, the grandfather, and she has the head of the bull, and she tells the Shadow Smith, who is the Fremen servant, she tells her that he was killed by the bull, and you hang the picture here and you hang the head there, and they should face each other, and that's it.
Okay, this was better. I mean, there is some underlying rebel tendencies in Paul, and that comes to the fore even at the end of the movie, where he's given a choice. Jessica clearly wants to leave the planet and get back to Caladan so that they can amass their forces, come back, and get to capture Arrakis back again. However, Paul says, no, I'm going to stay here. I can see it. I'm going to stay with Fremen, and goes directly against what Jessica really wants. So that sort of ties in that arc of, and that characteristic of him rebelling, not adhering to what his parents want him to do, but he will choose his own path the way he sees that in his head.
Yeah, and the book shows him as being, he doesn't, I wouldn't say he likes his leadership role, but he takes it very seriously, and he does want to avenge his father. He keeps it in mind. He keeps in mind that his family was wronged. He keeps in mind that people were murdered and some people who are innocent were made to look guilty. And he takes his role very seriously. I don't think the book shows him rebelling against his dukedom much, because Paul here, I don't know whether he wants to be duke, but he does have that sense of responsibility that he wants to take his house forward and do something good for the Fremen once he joins them.
Okay, so I guess we will call this Dune Part 1. We've gone on quite a bit with Part 1 itself. So in the next part, I think we need to discuss about the bagpipes, the ornithopters in detail, and much more. If you can bring in some snippets from the book, that'll be great. And the Fremen, of course. So yeah, we have a lot to cover. So I think we'll have to do this as a two-parter.
Okay, let's do this as a two-part.
This is longer than the movie itself, I suppose, our podcast and analysis.
It's always like that. I mean, we're dealing with the book all.
Yes, okay. So thank you, folks. I'll see you in Dune Part 2 next time around.
Yes. See you.
See you. Bye. Bye-bye.
If you liked the podcast and found it useful, please feel free to share the link via your favorite social media platform. To recommend an interesting book for our next discussion, please leave us a comment. See you next time.